Yeah, so a lot of what we're talking about with regard to, the fantasy parallels or coming up with things all relies on creativity. And so I'm a scientist. Not everybody realizes that being a scientist requires a lot of creativity, and it requires a lot of different types of creativity. We have to come up with any new ideas. We have to come up with ways to test the ideas. We have to figure out ways to convince people to give us money to go about testing those ideas. It also requires a lot of writing. So I know that there's different types of creativity and different ways that you can use creativity, I suppose, in your work. So I wondered if you could talk about the types of creativity that you feel like you use the most in your when you're writing and how they kind of manifest, and I guess to some extent your relationship with it as a writer. So like
Hmm.
I don't enjoy all of the I have different levels of enjoyment of the different creative avenues in my work, and I imagine the same might be true for you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think when I think about the writing part of my day, I'm a writer who generally I try to do some outlining and character development before I start writing. And that's really fun because it's like you're starting from zero, but also there are like no real stakes. Like you can always change your mind. So I really enjoy getting into who's the character, like basics, like what do they look like? Who's their family? Who are their best friends? Like that sort of development. And then thinking about some of the key scenes. Usually that's not something that I have to like force so much as it's coming to me. And then at a certain point, I'm like, oh, I can't find out anything else until I start writing. My relationship to the writing process kind of depends on the day. I sometimes really love drafting, and sometimes it's the absolute worst thing. I sometimes really love editing, and sometimes it's the worst thing. I don't really think of them as separate creative processes. They are all drafting is like kind of like, a sculptor with a marble block, and you're just chipping away and you're trying to see, wait, what am I going to build here? Except it's the opposite where there's nothing, and then you're adding things to it. And I will say the scenes that are easy to write are when the characters, the romantic interests are on the page together. And the scenes that are hard to write are when that's not the main engine, which is why I ended up writing romance. I hate writing anything else. And then I think editing is when I can more often see the patterns or get editing is when I get deeper into the characters' heads. I'm not just like, what's happening? I'm saying, why is this happening? And I kind of get deeper, and I think I've been learning to get a little bit more angsty because I am getting more into the subconscious reasons why a character is doing something. And so that's, I think, a different type of creativity that is also enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that some days you like one and the other days you hate it. I know for a fact that writing often comes with those moments where everything sucks and it's the last thing you want to do, but you actually just have to power through it. So, what are some of your strategies that you use to power through those?
Yeah. Sometimes it is a question of asking myself, why is it being so tough? Is it because I am stuck writing characters in not being together? And why am I doing that? Sometimes it is stepping away, literally getting up and walking across the room. Sometimes just like releases whatever solution that was in my subconscious. It's like, oh, duh, you should be doing this instead. Sometimes it is setting smaller goals, like, oh, normally I'm trying to write 1,000 to 1,500 words a day. And sometimes I'll be like, I'm just going to write 500 words and see if I can write 500 words later. And then normally by the time I get to 500 words, I'm like on a roll. And so then I can get there. Sometimes it's saying, oh, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes and see how many words I can get out. So I try a lot of different things. I think the biggest thing is like listening to my subconscious. I know my creativity comes in flows. So, like earlier this week, I had a day where I wrote 4,200 words. They just were flowing. I was like, I've got to go to the bathroom, but I also need to keep writing. And I was just in the zone.
Wow.
And then the next day, I was like, I am depleted. I know what comes next. I don't mind writing it, but I'm just, it's just, I don't have that energy. And so sometimes I just need to accept my process. Not everyone needs to write a certain amount every day. Creativity is not like it's not part of machinery. But sometimes also like the day that I felt depleted, I was like, okay, I'm going to lower my goal, but I'm still going to get some words on the page. And that's because, I have to hit deadlines. But then, like, for example, on weekends, I try really hard to honor my weekend because that is going to be refilling my well of creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great strategies. The ones that the recommendations I give my research students who also have to meet deadlines, I recommend the Pomodoro method, which is you set a timer for like 25 minutes and you only write for 25 minutes, but the writing can be jotting down notes, outlining, actually writing paragraphs and sentences, or editing or whatever, but you're doing your writing task for that 25 minutes. Then you take a 5 minute break and then repeat. And then after like 3 or 4 of them, you take a longer break. So that's my number one that I recommend for them.
My therapist told me something interesting, which was that she had to do in her therapy master's degree or whatever, they had to do an exercise where they had to write about their process about writing. So, like, they were writing an essay that was like, right now, I hate the idea of writing. Why do I hate the idea of writing? Something along those lines to really confront it. And I haven't done that exercise because I'm not a master's in therapy, but I have thought about that and I have realized that a lot of times when I am just like, oh, I hate this, like I feel like a physical pain coming in my head, means I'm on the brink of figuring out what is going to happen. And I have to sit and go through that and not run away from it.
Interesting. I often start my writing times with a 3 to 5 minute writing dump where I open up a document that I do not save that is just me writing. Usually, this sucks. This is the absolute worst. I don't know why I have to write. I just want to do science and I have no motivation to do this at all, but I must do it and other garbage. And then I delete it. And
That's
after
so
the three or five,
interesting.
and after the 3 to 5 minutes of writing dump, I'm ready to get going.
Nice. That's a great
Usually by the
idea.
end of it, usually by the end of it, I started like actually putting down bullet points of what I need to get done during that writing session, even because I've gotten around the anger at having to do it and just like gotten into the planning mode. So
That's
yeah.
interesting. I think creative writers, we feel that like, I don't want to do this. And then it triggers a lot of existential, but this is
Mm,
what I want to do. I'm like, I literally want to write this novel, but I don't want to write. Does that mean that I'm not a writer? Does that mean I shouldn't be doing this? We all feel that way, but I think it triggers this like bigger,
yeah.
like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Which is a lot to confront when you're just trying to get through 1,000 words.